Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to give it a few minutes just to make sure everyone could get in and settled. Thank you for joining us today for celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., a conversation with BIPOC authors and also readings by um, everyone except for myself today. So I'll introduce everyone and then we'll get to those readings. I'm very excited for uh, these. I've read a lot of the synopsises, but to have the words, I'm here for it. So we'll get that going. Just keep in mind, there's also a sale going on today at Boat Strokes Books. The details will come through in the chat as you see authors come as we go to the author readings, and then we go to the sort of group discussion at the end, or I have some questions. I will be asking questions throughout, but if you have a question, whether it be for one or all of our authors, go ahead and drop that into the chat. I'll be monitoring, and we'll make sure that gets. You can either do it into the chat or into the Q&A. So there's two options there too. So, all right, I'm gonna get us started. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us on celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I'm Sandra Santiago, and my pronouns are he and him. And I'm going to be having a great discussion with three of Bold Strokes authors today. So today we have Ann Shade, we have Lauren Melissa Ellzey, and we have Frederick Smith. So I'm going to give them a more detailed intro here in a few minutes as they go to read their sections. But thank you again for joining us. So if you're not reading, just go ahead and hop off camera, and then I will direct as needed to bring people back on and as we go into questions. So thank you. And we're going to start today with Ann. Ann Shade has a passion for writing stories about women who love women, whether it's contemporary, erotica, historical, intrigue, or fantasy. Ann's stories cross many genres with one common factor: BIPOC representation in all of her main characters. When Ann isn't writing, she's coordinating dream weddings and daydreaming about plans for her future bed and breakfast. All right. Thank you, Ann. Go ahead and take it away.
All right. Today I will be reading from Three Wishes, my current novel. It's a fantasy paranormal. And the excerpt I'll be reading from is when Jahir, a vengeful Black genie, possesses Malik, who's a Jinn soldier from a mythical kingdom called Akiba. And he returns to the island seeking revenge for having been exiled many centuries ago. Naima watched in fear as Malik slowly strode toward her with an evil grin on his face. There is a part of the story Chirag did not tell you. His mate was my mate as well. When we lost her, I was just as devastated. But instead of staying and sharing our grief, Chirag left me alone to mourn not only her loss, but his as well. He took what little light I had left within me. The darkness almost swallowed me whole until I heard all he had done with this little island. While I had been wallowing in grief and despair, he had been creating a life of light and love. He had done all of that without asking me to join him. We had shared a millennium together, and it was as if none of that ever happened. I wanted to know why, so I came. So I came here. But he chose those weak mortals over me. I thought that if I could show him the flaw in his plan, he would give it up and we could be together again. Malik's eyes burned bright with anger. Chirag didn't choose the mortals as much as he chose a life of peace and to share that peace with human and jinn alike, Naima said, to live in a world where fear and distrust no longer existed among the two beings, and that despite our powers, jinn and humans shared more in common than any other beings in the realms. You came in and tried to destroy that peace. That's why he sent you away. The reason why doesn't matter. All that matters is that he did it. What we shared should have outweighed what he built here, he angrily growled. If Naima weren't pinned to the wall, she would have backed away from the madness in his eyes. Malik gathered his composure just as the doors to the throne room crashed open. The Jinn Council stood in the doorway, hands raised in a defensive spell. Li Jin Amin gaze landed on King Adnan's lifeless body, the awkward way his head lay on his broken neck, and and then back at Malik in horror. What have you done? I eliminated the only barrier to my throne. Amin looked at Princess Leia's still form on the floor. She is alive, Naima said. He looked relieved and nodded, then turned back toward Malik, watching him warily as he walked toward him. Who are we in the presence of? Someone far more powerful than you. Do you really think your council can stop me? I'm the most powerful black djinn in the realms. I have molded dark magic to my will over millenniums. We sense Malik is still with us. We would like to speak with him. I will speak on behalf of Malik. Have you come to bargain with us? What could we possibly have to bargain with you? Malik turned his back on the council and the soldiers now crowding the room and walked toward the throne. I want Akiba to rule as I see fit. After all, his gaze briefly landed on Adnan's lifeless body. You're without a ruler. A bargain calls for an exchange of something. What would the people of Akiba get in return? Malik shrugged. Their lives. There will be no need of a council, as I have the only say in what happens. So the jinn would be free to do as they please. The humans will be allowed to continue to stay, with the understanding that jinn and human equality will be no more. They are here out of the kindness of my heart and will learn that their place is beneath that of the jinn. That is no bargain, and we will not allow you to take Akiba. Malik raised his hand, snapped his fingers, and turned Amin into a pile of ash. There was a moment of stunned silence before chaos erupted. The rest of the council and the jinn guards threw everything they had at Malik. With his powers focused elsewhere, Naima was able to break her invisible bonds and pull Aaliyah out of harm's way. As the sound of bones snapping, blood-curdling screams, and scurrying feet resounded throughout the room, Malik wiped them all out with the flick of his wrist. When the slaughter ended, he raised his hand and forced both Naima and Aaliyah to their knees before him. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Let me tell you what you said. There was a stunned moment of silence, and I was actively stunned. I was like, I wanted you to know that accurate.
Thank you.
I absolutely adore stories about the gin, so I've been very excited for this. You do have a question here, so we're gonna skip my question, and I'm gonna ask you this question instead. What
Okay.
do you like most about writing fantasy? And do you have a favorite genre you enjoy writing most?
So I like my favorite genre to write about is historical. But I am leaning more towards fantasy now. I really enjoyed this and doing the research on Jin and the culture and that whole aspect of it. So fantasy is kind of eking its way up there to historical, but I loved writing fantasy and I've always wanted to, but I just was never brave enough to do it. So I had to get 6 books under my belt before I felt like I could actually do something like this.
It's fair. I definitely understand the waiting until you're right for
Yes.
a story or a genre. Do you feel like this genre lends to BIPOC characters in a way that others don't, or is it something you want to see for that representation?
It's something I want to see for that representation. As you can, I don't know if you can see my little, uh, I would like to see more of that. I mean, you see it in Octavia Butler's books, and it's starting to get back in there with more African American characters. I've been reading a lot of fantasy fiction with African American characters. I try and post them on Instagram so people can see what I'm reading and also get into it. But I mean, we're everywhere. Why can't we be in fantasy? Why can't we be in futuristic novels? Why can't we be in space somewhere, living on other planets? I don't understand. I don't see why we couldn't be wherever everyone else is.
Very, very good points. Thank you for your reading. Everyone, don't worry,
Thank
it
you.
will be back. We're gonna hop over with Lauren Melissa Ellzey today. So if you want to come on screen, I think you might be on mute still. So go ahead. There you go. Okay. Thank you.
Hi. Right.
Lauren Melissa Ellzey, known across pronouns she, her, known across social media as Auntie Nell, is a Black multiracial autistic self-advocate, activist, and author. Through the writing and presenting, she highlights the inequitable systems that oppress queer, BIPOC, and disabled folks. Her young adult novels, Boy at the Window and Gimmicks and Glamour, emphasize the importance of belonging for queer, neurodivergent youth of color. She holds an MS in Library and Information Science and resides in New York City with her partner and their 3-year-old dog. All right, Lauren, Melissa, take it away.
Thanks for having me, Sander, and everyone. And thanks for joining us at Bookathon, folks. I'll be reading from my most recent novel, Gimmicks and Glamour, which centers around Ashley Harris, a biracial and bisexual high school senior. Ashley has a bad reputation at both school and home, and the only one who sees past the gossip is her best friend, Harris, who may or may not be playing with Ashley's feelings. But as Ashley speeds toward graduation, there's a secret lurking beneath her rough exterior that may finally rise to the surface. How are you feeling today, Ashley? I stare the college guidance counselor down. Her hair is pinned in an impeccable bun. Her lipstick is so neutral, you'd think her face is au naturel. But there's nothing natural about sitting with a practical stranger and being asked about my life like it's a subject for small talk. By now, I've figured out that when adults ask me how I'm doing, there are only a few general replies that make the cut. I'm good is the best. All the problems get buried under a sea of good. Silence is easy because adults can fill it in with, she's just shy, or she's doing well, or she's a bit sleepy this morning. No one wants to hear I'm angry, especially not my tennis instructor meeting me for the first time, or my parents when I got off the middle school bus to join them on the porch, or my aunt come to visit over Christmas, or my therapist back in the 7th grade. Well, at first my therapist liked hearing about the angry feelings, but even she got tired of it after a couple of weeks. Try not to hide your real feelings behind the anger, my therapist said, and it was honestly reason enough for me to never take her advice. I'm not hiding behind angry. I'm angry, and I mean it. But today, I settled for, I could be better. Mrs. Sherry shifts in her seat. I imagine you know why you're here then. It's about graduation. We want to help you get on the right track so you can get that diploma in June. According to the local high school survival handbook, my entire life centers around a diploma. Beyond that, I'm best off taking my daily prescription of pretending. If I pretend to be straight, I'm better off than being bisexual. If I follow my peers' beauty standards, I can pretend that my naturally tan skin is the result of summer vacations. Pretend that my curly hair doesn't exist since it's hidden in the sulfur smell of Brazilian blowouts. I can act like my African-American father is invisible if no one sees his photograph. And then everyone else can feel more comfortable when I'm standing in the middle of the Hackley High School hallway with the label straight white girl hanging over my head. When I tried the invisible line on my dad, he told me to watch my mouth. Mom mentioned something about never making friends with an attitude like that. I shut it because a fight with them is never worth it. Sure, sneaking out is easy, but it's no fun being grounded for another month. Your parents are aware of the situation, Mrs. Sherry adds. Together, we can come up with a plan to help you graduate on time. It's not that I don't like my parents. I just don't think they knew what they signed up for when they decided to have a kid. I think they thought the worst of their troubles would be their interracial wedlock. But I guess a mixed baby is a mixed bag, and they're too heterosexual to realize that bisexuality doesn't die off with a first kiss from a boy. Mrs. Sherry taps her manicured finger on a stack of papers on her desk. No doubt it's my disreputable school record. You'll need to make up the work you missed last semester, she says. You're not in any clubs or on any sports teams. You've got time. Even though there's only one semester left, you can still pull yourself out of this. What Mrs. Sherry doesn't know is that the only thing I've got going for me, what Mrs. Sherry doesn't know is that there's a secret lurking beneath my bad attitude. As it turns out, I'm out of my mind. Not in the fun way, not in the throw you a party way, and definitely not in the creative artist way. I see things other people don't see. You know how children make up imaginary friends, or how nightmares can seem real when you open your eyes, or how the long departed haunt their loved ones? I don't see things like that, so don't even go there. I've been seeing since I could rub two thoughts together and put names to faces and items and feelings. I'll be sitting at the dining room table eating with mom and dad, but neither of them notices that we've got an extra guest with green skin and thorns for ears up on the countertop, swinging his legs while he listens to the 7 o'clock news on the TV screen. I might be taking a trigonometry test, and while everyone else solves for the sum of the area of the circumference of 6 circles, I'm trying to ignore the girl with see-through wings and powder pink eyes that finds it funny to swap Mr. Spagnola's pencils with pens. What's more, I'm almost positive that the things I'm seeing are real. The only person who knows that I still see these things is Karis. And to be honest, I think she just puts up with it because she doesn't have any other friends. She wears this kind of knowing grin on her face when I point out a troll in the restroom or a sprite lighting up the night. Maybe it amuses her. Maybe she really believes me. What counts is that she never questions me about the fairies. She accepts this quirk of mine. That acceptance keeps me sane, or at least partly sane.
Oh my goodness. I loved every minute of that. I feel like I need to call my parents. I'm also multiracial, and I need to call my parents and be like, a mixed child is a mixed bag, because perfection in that statement. I
A
felt
good mixed bag.
I I was riveted. So I'm have a question here for you. How often do you actively think about representation, and how does it play into your work?
Oh, representation is honestly one of the key foundational blocks in all of my writing. I strongly believe in, founding my work in representation as a young adult fiction author. I write about queer, neurodivergent youth of color, and as it stands, all of my protagonists so far have been multiracial. But in this particular story, Ashley sees fairies. And while I absolutely love fairies, there's a lot more to it than just the sight. So Ashley is biracial and she interacts with a fairy character that is stuck in the mortal world and representing biracial experience through this idea of a fairy who's in the mortal world, as well as Ashley, who's biracial. And the fact that these two grow to understand each other, they grow a common understanding with each other. It's a huge centerpiece of the story to kind of show this overlapping intersectional cultural experience that I don't feel many folks talk about so much yet. And Ashley's site is super cool, but it's really also a metaphor for sensory processing differences and representing that element that impacts so many autistic and neurodivergent people. And I just at the end, I really want to create stories that I wish I could have had as a teen that represent the identities that I carry and I know so many other teens carry.
Very I think that the rise of like the representation of neurodivergent in its place in communities of color is so important, and I value authors who write to that. As an I don't write YA myself, so I'm like, if I as a child I value you who do, because those books are relevant. I have a question for you from the chat. It says, I love the line, I'm definitely tired of taking my daily prescription of pretending, and the way you tell this story. Um, Within the current environment of banning books, do you find that your stories, which are raw and real and poignant, might be forbidden to young audiences? How do you come to that if they were? So how are you thinking about that if that's the case?
I was actually asked this question recently by another person, like telling me, like, "Hey, your books might get banned," and my response is, "That's not going to stop me from writing them because those experiences are real, And if folks are going to ban it, that's not going to stop me from supporting, representing, and coming together with others around reality. And, if that happens, if that day happens, I will probably make a big fuss about it, if only to say, this doesn't belong, this shouldn't be happening. And one of my most influential, I guess, founts of inspiration when I was a teenager writing was Francesca Leah Block, who's a magical realism writer of YA fiction. And her books have been burned and banned. And her books meant the world to me as a teenager. So if that happens to me, I'll just be like, hey, I'm like Francesca Leah Block, and maybe be a little proud. But I also hope we come to a point where books like this are no longer being banned. I think that's even more important.
I hear that. I agree. Thank you, audience member, for the question. And thank you, Lauren Melissa, for your reading. Again, Lauren Melissa will be back. We're going to bring up Frederick Smith.
Hello, hello, hello. How are you today?
So far, so good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. And greetings from San Francisco, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day, no matter where you're watching from. Are we doing intros? I'm going to get started.
I have your intro right here, so I'm
Okay,
gonna
okay,
keep
cool.
All right. Born and raised in Detroit, Fred currently lives in San Francisco. He is an author of 6 novels featuring Black and Latinx queer characters looking for love in all the right and wrong places. Fred's upcoming title, One and Done, which he will be reading from today, comes out in June 2024 on Bold Strokes Books. Fred earned a doctorate in educational leadership from social justice and currently works as an administrator in student affairs and higher education. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, I am so excited. This is my very first time reading from my upcoming title, One and Done, which is a contemporary male-male romance set in the city of San Francisco and in Oakland. And this is my first time reading from it, so I'm kind of excited about it. It's currently on pre-order or available for pre-order now on the Bold Strokes Books website. And I'm going to be reading from the character of Dr. Taylor James, who is just out on a random Sunday fun day and encounters the arrogant Dustin McMillan. Dustin McMillan poured into my life as effortlessly as the top shelf tequila going into the first margarita of the afternoon that Markel was shaking up for me. I was sitting alone in my usual seat adjacent to the bar at Beau, where I could chat with my best friend Markel, who was mixing up drinks for the Sunday drag brunch crowd. The DJ had just lowered the music a bit for the hostess and performer, Miss Coco Hydrate, to get the drag brunch going. She'd asked us to get our singles out for the queens performing their interpretations of Beyonce's Renaissance album. Still a favorite of all the Black and brown gays, even after all the time the album had been out, even after most of the gays had been to one of the Renaissance World Tour concerts. And as I always did on Sunday afternoons, I reached into my chocolate Telfar bag and took 2 20s out to change into singles for the drag performers. Only $40? This guy asked as he sidled up near to me and sat in an empty bar stool 2 seats over. Renaissance has 16 tracks, and you're tipping barely $2 per performance in expensive-ass San Francisco? I swung my face toward the somewhat raspy baritone voice commenting on my tipping. For a second, I thought I was looking at myself in the mirror. He was a Black guy, way too attractive, wearing a blue fitted suit that looked Armani and a salmon-colored button-down dress shirt with a light blue tie. Reminded me of that Nate Burleson newscaster on CBS Mornings. Confident looking too, like he thought he was the shit. Definitely overdressed for day drinking in the Castro. But then again, Markel often said the same thing about me. Not that I was sizing him up for anything beyond curiosity. We shared the same mid to dark brown complexion and smooth skin that looked taken care of by an esthetician. And whereas I kept my hair in more of a clean-cut, tapered fro with a small mustache and chin goatee, Two seats over guy was a little more rugged looking, wearing a high top, natural with a fade, full beard, and mustache. His edge up was crisp and sharp. Beyond superficial looks, that's where our similarities seemed to end. Who asked you? I asked. Maybe I should have retorted in a nicer way, I thought, given that the number of gay Black men in the Castro, especially those who talked to other Black men in the Castro, was generally low to none. But the way he approached me, my response was warranted. I'm just saying, two seats over guy said, you're the only other guy in here like me, overdressed, suited, and booted. The girls are going to expect more from you and from me. Huh, that's funny. I've never seen you in here before. I'm pretty much here every Sunday. Oh, so you're a regular then? You could say that, I said. My best friend works here. Oh, so everyone in here knows you're a frugal tipper. In this expensive ass city? And what's up with this city, by the way? Is it even a destination city anymore? I mean, the homeless, the mental health, the drugs. Hell, y'all even made Keith Lee shorten his food critic tour. This how y'all be living in San Francisco now? He punctuated the questions with an arrogantly radiant smile filled with Hollywood perfect teeth. Enamored and at a loss for words at the moment, I looked down while thinking of a response, noting the stainless steel Chopard watch on one of his wrists and what looked to be a Tiffany and Company link bracelet on the other. I peeped the Armani white leather sneakers and concluded his suit definitely had to be the same label as the shoes. These brands I knew by look, not because I bought them for myself, but because my parents often gifted me things I never thought or wanted to acquire for myself. Clearly, his taste and income for exorbitant goods were behind his opinions about San Francisco, a city I'd call home for about 5 years after leaving my family and friends I loved in Los Angeles for a better professional opportunity in the Bay Area. I'm generally quick-witted and ready for a response for everything, so rarely does someone come for me in my professional or personal life. People who know me know winning a debate with me was hard, except for maybe Markel's attempts to poke emotional holes in my reasons for remaining single. Well, what I'm not gonna do is buy into anything that critiques our Black woman mayor, her agenda, or her performance, I said, not really wanting to get into politics at a bar. I just wanted to talk to Markel on his Sunday shift, have my one and done cocktail, and watch some drag. But here we were. Black women already get treated as less than, and buying into that thinly veiled sexist and racist negative talk about her is a slippery slope meant to set up the stage for conservatives to try to take back the city. They've already pushed enough of us out of San Francisco, Oakland, and the Bay Area. We're not doing this now. And it's not just San Francisco, it's all major cities. Point taken, two seats over guy said. I ain't even had my first drink, and I have had a day. Still, you don't get off the hook for cheap tipping. You thought I forgot, huh? We smiled. Our eyes lingered. I don't know why. Romance was definitely not in my plan. Thank you. One and done, June 2024.
I am so excited. I have insider knowledge about this one and I want to sing its praises, but I also wrote on my notes, no spoilers. So we're gonna go straight to a question before I get too thrilled. I the question I have here for you is, are there any BIPOC authors who have been an influence for you?
Wow, so many. So my family jokes that I've been reading since 3 years old. But when I was able to like kind of, check out and buy and get my own books, people like Elin Harris, who was he passed about 10 years ago, Black gay man who wrote some of the first contemporary novels about Black gay men and bisexual men set in Atlanta. Love all of Elin Harris's books. And definitely his work influences both my thought patterns and my writing as well. Another one who comes to mind is Terry McMillan, who like almost all of her books have been turned into major motion pictures, like Waiting to Exhale, Stella, How Stella Got Her Groove Back, etc. She's from the Detroit area originally, now lives out here in California. I just love all of her like kind of family relationships, romantic relationships that she writes about in her work. But other people like influence me, people like Beverly Jenkins, who writes like Black historical romance, also from Detroit area. Pearl Clegg, who's based in the Atlanta area, just so many. And then just current people like, I definitely think about people like Terry Jones, Rebecca Weatherspoon, Erin Foley, Rashid Darden, just so many. And I give my praises and homage to all the people who have influenced my literary life and the way in which I look at the world through books.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like we need to go back to the recording for that list, just to make sure we have everyone you named there. I did know some of those names. All right. From the chat, I have this question for you. First of all, some praise. You had me at drag show and cocktail. 2 seats over guy, loving the phrase too. Question. Do you enjoy writing friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, or what trope do you prefer most? Also, your dialogue is engaging and snappy. Do you enjoy writing dialogue or narration the most?
All right. So some of my favorite tropes. So I think both in real life and in my writing, I love friends to lovers, a slow burn, because I think that, it's just nice to see how people naturally evolve, whether it's in real life or in fiction, how they evolve and all of a sudden they have this aha moment like, oh my God, I think I like them. Or whoa, they've like grown on me or something. And so that's one of my favorite tropes. This is my first time writing like kind of a strangers to enemies to lovers trope, because they meet in a bar and they don't like each other, but eventually, and I'm not going to spoil it, they end up in a forced proximity situation where they gotta work on a project together and they did not know it. What are some of my other tropes? I mean, I definitely like, I'll just leave it at friends to lovers. And what was the other question? The other part of the question? Oh,
Do you
dialogue.
enjoy writing dialogue or
Oh,
narration the most?
oh my God, I love writing dialogue. And I'm really grateful for this moment right now to have read this out loud because I'm gonna have to go back and clean some stuff up. One and Done is in its final edits. And so, I think one of the things that's really helpful when we all read our stuff out loud is we're like, oh, that doesn't flow quite the way I thought it was on the page and everything. So I'm definitely into writing dialogue. I love it. I love kind of the back and forth between people and everything, and having them have distinct voices in terms of how they communicate with each other.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for the question. All right, so we're gonna have everyone come back. I have some more some group questions now. So today we're here in this particular panel. It's titled Celebrating MLK. So I wanted to ask our authors if and how the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. has an influence on the work you do today, who you are as an author, what aspects of that resonate with you still, if any. So anyone want to volunteer? Otherwise, we'll call Frederick first.
Oh, I had a feeling you were going to pick me first. I think that the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is so important. And I think oftentimes in terms of our K through 12 education system and everything, accurate history, accurate portrayals of people aren't often taught. And so I think that, the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his partner, Coretta Scott King, who we cannot forget, who was equally yoked in the struggle and in making change, we can't forget. And, and I think that it's still an ongoing, beautiful struggle toward equity and equality. And I think that that we can't let the life and legacy of Dr. King get ignored or get erased from our minds and from our history books.
Yeah, very good point. What about you, Anne?
So I was raised in a somewhat militant household. I had an uncle who was a revolutionist. He was in a Black Panther type movement. So I actually learned about Malcolm X because we also share the same birthday. as Malcolm X. So I learned about Malcolm X before I even learned about Martin Luther King. But when I did learn about Martin Luther King Jr., it became somewhat of it enlightened me a bit more. Malcolm X kind of brought out my Black militant, Black, and which is funny, raised in the suburbs of Chicago and I'm militant is ironic. But Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches and his philosophy kind of toned me down a bit to be able to adapt to being quietly militant, and still be effective in my militancy. So I think his influence has really been to give me a voice that isn't so angry as it could have been if I had stayed in the direction I was going. And it also kind of made me feel like the combination of both Malcolm and Martin kind of gave me the reason why all my books are focused with African-American characters, because I want us to have a voice no matter what the genre. That's why I genre hop. You can't pin me down on a genre. Um, because I feel like we can be anything, anywhere, anyhow, and that's where I want our voices to be heard more often. So
Very fair. Very good points. Lauren, Melissa.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Anne and Frederick have said really resonates with me. It's a little hard to follow it up. So I'm like, oh, that's it. But like I think from like a YA perspective, I think, that the famous speech, which is often misquoted or like cut up and spliced, the I Have a Dream speech. But in general, like it's the idea behind the speech being that there is like a future where, young Black children will grow up, just knowing their inherent value and seeing and being seen as inherently valuable and in an equitable, just society, a dream that can seem very hard to grasp, but is still nonetheless a dream to hold on to, is something that I want to strive toward taking steps to through writing young adult fiction with BIPOC representation. And I think it's also very important to continue discussing those things as a multiracial person myself. And I think Gen Z is like the most like multiracial generation, so far, and wanting to continue talking about these complexities, about intersectionality, and making sure that multiracial and biracial youth don't feel as though they have to choose a part of their identity, that they can be the fullness of their identity, and that that's important, and that they can stand in that, and that belongs as well as part of that dream. So I would say those are my thoughts that are being formed around it.
Very awesome. I feel like when thinking about this question, I felt like it's a part of that legacy for me to be like invited to a panel of BIPOC authors. So I just wanted to say thank you all for being here and for being sort of the embodiment of that. So I remember telling my parents that Dr. King was one of the few people in my childhood zeitgeist who had the title of doctor. And so to know that there was aspiration there and there's a direction that we can move in as a group, and then to actually see people achieving that. And even to this day, I still sort of sit at my desk and I'm like, what am I doing? Does this even matter? And then I get an email that's like, here's you and people who you share identity with coming together to have this discussion, to have a nuanced and relevant conversation. So I just wanted to say that you are all a part of my MLK dream. And so I appreciate you being a part of this panel with me. Lauren, Melissa, a few times you've said intersectionality. So that actually leads me to my next question. As queer and BIPOC authors, how do you navigate intersectionality, whether that be with race and sexuality, race and gender, whichever intersection? race and neurodivergence. How do you navigate that for yourself as a writer? And then how do you navigate that with your characters? And we'll start with Lauren, Melissa, since you brought up intersectionality.
This is my jam. No, I love talking about intersectionality. As a queer, Black, multiracial woman who is autistic and all the things. But I think in terms of writing, I feel really passionately about this topic in general, but I want to talk about a particular piece of it, which is that I often hear in the LGBTQ community, people saying we no longer need coming out stories. That everyone, can just come out and we don't need those stories anymore. And I really feel frustrated sometimes when I hear that, because I haven't really seen a lot of the coming out stories, like a huge amount of coming out stories for BIPOC characters. And so I really think it's important to have queer coming out stories with BIPOC characters. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of youth and adults who don't get to walk through that process through fiction. And I also think it is a unique experience depending on different cultures, how that might play out. And so that intersection and seeing that intersection play out through the coming out story is very important to me.
Yeah, I feel like I resonate with that a lot. I remember coming out to my parents and having part of the conversation be, but you're already Black, so why make it harder for yourself? I'm like, whoa there, Mom, let's chat about this. So I think that's a very poignant point to make. So thank you. We'll do Frederick this time. Frederick.
All right. So I agree with everything that Laura and Melissa shared. And I also, think that in terms of intersectionality, so everyone who is on this panel and who's watching has a race or an ethnicity. Everyone here has a gender, everyone has a sexuality. And I think that acknowledgement and that reality is something that I think that many of us who are on screen or watching actually have to think about and navigate the world every day. Thinking about identity. And so with that in mind, I often, with my characters, I often create characters who are also thinking about, their place in the world, how they navigate, within the queer community, outside the queer community, et cetera, within, the communities in which they live and don't live, et cetera. And I think it's so important, especially for readers, to either be affirmed in who they are in terms of their identities, and also maybe for people who may not identify as how any of us on screen identify, to get a peek into the world of people who might be different than them. I think that's where empathy arises. I think that's where care and compassion, come into play for people to understand someone else's lived experiences. I don't know. Sometimes I joke to myself. Like actually, when I was printing out my pages today, I was like, "Wow!" Like I wonder, and this is like it's gonna sound like really weird, but I was like, I wonder if sometimes in some workplaces or like sometimes on some panels, I'm like, everyone is white, and I'm like, I wonder if everyone on that panel knows that everyone is white, and like, do they think about it? Or like I think about like committees, or I think about workplaces. I'm like, does anyone ever sit here and think everyone here is white? Or everyone here is, X, Y, Z and everything. And so bringing it back to intersectionality, representation is important. I know there's some other questions, we're going to talk about that. But I think that intersectionality is important because it just amplifies the reality of the world that we're in today.
Thank you. I feel like your book, One and Done, presents an intersectionality that I think is a rising conversation in at least communities that I'm a part of, and that's with education and race and queerness. And I think that even in the civil rights era, like Dr. King had queer people a part of his movement, and that's not a part of the conversation sometimes. So I just wanted to like just acknowledge how like wide and multifaceted that is. And let's hop down T.
I'm gonna ask you to repeat the question.
The question is, as queer and LGBT plus authors, as well as BIPOC authors, how do you navigate intersectionality for yourself as a writer, but also within your stories for your characters?
I'm very big on having my characters being relatable, and making sure that when a reader picks up my book, they can see themselves in the character, whether they're coming out, whether they're dealing with um, uh, death and having to restart and in the in a new relationship. And so I want to make sure that we all see ourselves in my characters, the way they look, if they're thick girls, if they're athletic looking, if they're butch, stud, whatever. I kind of go all over the place, just like with my genres. My characters are also all over the place. And I mean, the biggest part for me was when I did Love and Lotus Blossom, was to make sure that older women who were coming out late in life, like I did, are able to read this story and see themselves in it. And to make sure that they know someone has gone through it with them, someone understands what they've been through, and that they're not alone. And I think that's what all of our stories do, is to show queer BIPOC readers that they are not alone, and that there are stories to be told that aren't ending in tragedy, that aren't filled with angst and drama, and that we can all have at some point a happy ending. So there we can all have our happily ever after, and still and it be realistic, which I think also our stories are. Even with fantasy stories, there's some realism in them. Like, with Lauren's characters, these characters are very real people in how they're represented. But they're still able to find some happiness in their life. They're not living in this world where, oh, poor me, because I have this situation and I can know, I just can't be happy. I'm going to be miserable my whole life. I'm going to be depressed or sad. It's good for us to show some positivity within our community, through these stories.
I think that you made some very good points there. I definitely, as deliverers of happily ever after, I think that is very relevant and very important to have, because uh, there is a lot of depiction and representation for the sadder side of things. So I think the happier side of things is great. I think the intersectionality that you mentioned is with age. So I think we have whole genres for younger readers, and I think that is profound and important. But I think that doesn't mean leave the older readers out, right? And
Yeah,
so
no.
people
I
who,
made sure Love and Lotus Blossom, the character, it's going through her life. And,
right.
and she comes out as she's older. I've actually got in the queue of stuff I want to do, a character who is around my age starting over.
Yeah.
I'm 56 years old, so I still have a lot of life to live,
Yes.
and many women my age still do. So
I
I
think
don't think this
very
should be
important.
left out of being, happy.
Yes, I hear that. And I appreciate that perspective. I think it's something that I've heard as part of queer conversations, generally speaking. Even using the term queer has its age ranges, right? And so I think that it's I appreciate that you've said that. So we have, I think, just enough time to go around one more time and talk about. I'm going to have you. I'll direct. Come back, show us your book if you have the cover. Give us one last shout out about it. I was supposed to talk about mine apparently. I was too excited to talk to you all instead. So this is Head Over Heel Flip by Santiago. It came out last month. It's about street sports, so skateboarding, rollerblading, and BMX biking, and the people who fall in love in that atmosphere. So, um, thank you for having for Bold Strokes for hosting us. Again, check the chat for those discount codes and for the rest of the sales, and we'll go in reverse order. So we'll start with Frederick. Give us one last shout out at your book.
All right, so my newest title, One and Done, will be out in June 2024. Two Black men, a strange encounter on a drag show, and they find their happily ever after. But I also have 3 other titles on Bold Strokes books as well, in case you want to check out my backlist. That includes Play It Forward, about a professional basketball player and a LA activist, and 2 books co-authored with Chaz Lamar Cruz, in case you forgot, and Busy Ain't the Half of It. Thank you.
All right, and then Lauren Melissa Ellzey.
So I read today from Gimmicks and Glamour about Ashley Harris taking on her last year of high school while also taking on some fairies, maybe finding love at the same time. I also have Boy at the Window, which is that was my debut novel that combines cross-country track, some gay love, and Neverland. So I'd say check that one out. And my 3rd title is coming out in July, called Streamline. So been out for that. Thank you.
And last but not least, Handshake.
My current novel is 3 Wishes. It's a fantasy paranormal. It has Jinn, it has a wandering spirit, a lost spirit. It has someone having to do past life regression therapy. So it's full of lots of good fun and adventure. And then my next novel is a sexy little number. I don't know if you can see that, called Leather Lace and Locks, about 3 best friends and their dating and love lives. And that comes out April 1st in April.
Awesome. All right.
And this is my 8th book, so you can go back on Bolstro Books and
talk about backlist. Again, thank you so much for joining me and answering my questions and for reading from your amazing books. Thank you again to Bold Strokes for hosting us. There are more panels, so keep that in mind. And then there will also be some next weekend as well, where you will see some, or if not all of us again. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your night.
Bye.